didn't go with a center, but went with a power forward. The guy I picked was Shawn Kemp.
Yes.
Played in the NBA for 14 seasons, 6-time NBA All-Star, 3-time All-NBA second team, never made a first team. Won a gold medal in 94 during the FIBA World Championship. In my opinion, this guy, when I watched him, he was one of the most gifted leapers, powerful dunkers I've ever seen. And he arguably has probably my favorite dunk ever.
Yeah.
My favorite dunk ever goes back to the 1992 first round of the playoffs, throws down this vicious dunk on, and this is the only reason you know this man's name. Sorry to this guy, Alston Lister of the Warriors. And it wasn't about the fact, Brian, that he just threw the dunk down on him. It was the fact that he pointed at him after. It was the disrespect of it. And I was just like, yo, I like that.
Cross court, Kemp's got it right up into the alley. Tomahawk jam! Yeah, baby! Into Lister's face, and the Sonics take the lead. 48-47. Woo! The Rain Man!
And that's why they call this guy the Rain Man. He's called the Rain Man. Now, his peak of his career is really the best season that comes around for the team he played for the majority of his career, the Seattle Supersonics, and that was in 95-96. That was the first year that team went to the finals since 1979. But that year, he had a great season where he had just under 20 points in that season. Let me just make sure I have that correct. He had 19.6 and 11.4 rebounds in that year, while also shooting 56% from the field. Now, Kemp was a guy who did not stretch the floor that well as a big man. As he got older, his jump shot from about 15 to 18 feet got better. In that finals that year, they played the Bulls in that finals and lost in 6 games. He had 23.3 points, 55% shooting from the field, and 10 rebounds and 2 blocks per game, and finished a close second in finals MVP behind the great Michael Jordan. Now, that peak of his career, that really came from, you could say, from 1992-93 to 1997-98, which is when he got traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, his first year there. During that time, he was pretty consistent, anywhere between 18 to 20 points per game and averaging double-digit rebounds. So this was a walking double-double guy, very good low-post defender, probably underrated in that aspect. The thing you think about his game is you kind of think, when you say Brian, you think that he's one of the most gifted leapers, powerful dunkers, but his game quite never really evolved past that, right? Like, it was really truly based on that athleticism. And once he got traded to Cleveland and then later in his career to Portland, there were some weight issues and also some drug issues with Shawn Kemp that affected him in that way. So when you look at this guy, as powerful as he was, called him the Rain Man, super exciting, one of the most exciting players in the league at that time. I mean, for my NBA Jam heads who remember from back in the day, you didn't want to play people with Seattle because they had the glove, Gary Payton, and you had Shawn Kemp, and you had this guy who was quick and get steals, and you had this dude who could just jam on you. So it was absolutely crazy, but he's an interesting guy because I think the evolution of him, and I want to hear what you think, Brian, is the evolution of Shawn Kemp in my mind has always been Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin was a guy that we saw come into the league, really had that athleticism, maybe that we hadn't really seen from a guy in that mold, in that 6'8" to 6'10" range, 6'7". Shawn Kemp's a little smaller than that, excuse me. I sometimes think he's bigger than that, and was able to jump out of the gym like that. What we saw with Blake was we saw Blake earlier in his career than Shawn Kemp evolve his game away, facing up the basket, being able to shoot, and becoming Blake is underrated passer for a big man. So it's interesting because I don't think his game quite evolved the same way. What do you think about how he would fit in the modern NBA?
So it's funny because I actually, in preparation for this, I saw a little bit of Suns versus Sonics in the 93 Western Conference Finals, a little bit of Game 2 specifically from the Bulls and Sonics NBA Finals. And I watched Rain Man on VHS, which is on YouTube. So that was something that I saw in preparation for this. And obviously, having watched Shawn Kemp and go back and look at it, I mean, his highlights were very accessible from the early days of YouTube. So I'm very aware of even his Cleveland Cavaliers days where he shows up to training camp at reportedly 315 pounds and still makes an all-star team, or having made an all-star team the year before, which tells you about how nice he actually was. I kind of think Zion Williamson is Shawn Kemp now to some degree. I think
Huh.
because I think Zion Williamson, smaller and a different build. He's probably built more like Charles Barkley was, or he's not really built like anybody necessarily. But if you're gonna, liken him to somebody in terms of his build, you're probably going Charles Barkley before Shawn Kemp. So I kind of think he's a cross between, and I've said this, between Blake Griffin and Shawn Kemp, where, and you could probably throw in some Barkley a little bit there
And then
too, but
I might throw in a little Larry Johnson in there too. That's
yeah,
another guy.
yeah, like
Young Larry Johnson.
yeah, like guys like that. So I'm thinking, similar style of play. Shawn Kemp, again, a walking double double. Zion, a better scorer around the rim than Shawn Kemp was at 19 years old, I guess you would say. But I think it's that. I think now today Shawn Kemp is a rim running center who, you're gonna want to run pick and roll all day. There's more pick and rolls in today's NBA than there was back then, especially from the 3-point line, where he'll have more space. And he'll have more space to finish around the rim, which he was obviously very good at. People would encourage him to take the mid-range jumper more often to create even more space. And I think that space is going to ultimately, would ultimately help him finish, where I could see him, potentially averaging 25 and 11 in today's NBA in his prime. I could also see it going the other way, where you have to try to figure it out. But I think a good coach would figure it out, where it's like, yo, this has to be our center. He was listed 6'10". I'm not sure how actually tall he was, but because Charles Barkley was listed 6'6" and was 6'4" in that era. Patrick Ewing was listed 7 feet. He's come out and said he's 6'9". So I don't know how tall he actually is, but I think he's your small ball center now that you're trying to run pick and rolls. And there are a lot of guys in this era that I think he could out rebound as well. So I think that'll be a very interesting one that, I want to get to the part where we try to put him on some teams and, let's see what we can do with that. But I think, yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with him because he never really stretched his game as much as I would like during that time. But part of that is what we talked about before, where you just don't know if he was encouraged. Check this out, folks. Shawn Kemp never averaged more than 1 3-point attempt per game. In fact, he never even came to half a 3-point attempt per game.
Yeah.
His highest attempt average per season was 0.4, and that was in 96, 97, his last season with the Sonics. So he's never done that. Now, I know you want to look at some teams and think about where he could work. So I'm going to take some modern teams for you. I got one. First one up, because I think this team has kind of been missing somebody who could play the 4 that might have a little athleticism, and you wonder how it pairs with the 2 stars they have already. I'm going with the Washington Wizards. How do you see Shawn Kemp pairing with John Wall and Bradley Beal? Do you think that could work out?
I do, because see, that's one of the good spots where I think you can figure it out. And I like Thomas Bryant, and I think Thomas Bryant is good in that role, but he's not Shawn Kemp. And I think that, with Davis Bertans shooting 3s, spreading the floor, that's probably the ideal guy that you would have next to a Shawn Kemp, who's going to be parading around the paint, running the rim, going from coast to coast. And you want to try to find him on fast breaks, pick and rolls, and things of that nature. I'm not sure how much posting up you're going to do in today's NBA, but I would encourage that as well, because he could post up. He obviously showed that in his days with the Sonics and later on with the Cavs a little bit as well. So I think that would be an ideal spot, because John Wall, people can say what they want about him in terms of the criticisms and stuff, but this is someone who's going to get you 7, 8, 9, 10 assists per game when he's right, when he's healthy. He knows how to run a team. Apparently he wants to get into coaching, which obviously doesn't surprise me, because he does seem like he has a pretty high basketball IQ. I would like to see that, because that, he's, in some ways you could even say that he's a more athletic Gary Payton, John Wall is. So I think that's something that would work as well. And obviously with Bradley Beal, he's a guard. He's a shooting guard that's not going to just average like 0 assists per game. He'll actually give you like 4 or 5 assists. So I think that's a good spot for him. That would be a good spot.
All right, so the next team I'm going to is a little bit messy, because they have had a history recently of drafting a lot of 4s and kind of not knowing what to do with them. Shawn Kemp, it's funny, he played for this team at the end of his career in his last season, the Orlando Magic. Is Shawn Kemp a good fit with today's Orlando Magic?
Yeah, and I know it's funny because like we're not trying to name the perfect teams. We're just trying to see like how it would go with just 3 examples. And the Orlando Magic would be interesting because they're cluttered because they have Jonathan Isaac as a forward there. Mo Bamba's a big man. Vucevic is still there. They signed Al-Farouq Aminu for some reason, which didn't
Yep.
make any sense.
So why not
Uh,
sign another power forward? Why not bring it Shawn Kemp?
yeah. And I'm wondering how, like, see, that's an interesting scenario because he doesn't quite have the floor general point guard. Like, think about it. Think about it even this way. If Shawn Kemp doesn't get drafted to the Seattle Sonics, how does his career really look? Because not only did he land with, a team that was sort of on the up and up, but at the same time, he lands with Gary Payton, who happens to be one of the, I don't know, three best point guards of his generation, three, four best point guards of his generation. If you were to sort of rank them. And right now I'm looking at, oh, that's the wrong draft. I'm looking for there you go, the 1989 draft. Shawn Kemp was the 17th overall pick.
17
If
overall
he
pick.
if he just slides one more down, he'd be a Chicago Bull, where he almost went in that Scottie Pippen trade that never happened. How different is his career then, where he doesn't really have the point guard there? He has Jordan and Pippen. And does he ever really develop, or is he traded by the time you get to 1992 because this is a win now team who's trying to get parts to win? And while Scottie Pippen had developed, he got there a couple of years sooner, where they had the framework for him set up for him to do that.
Well, the thing you got to realize, the one thing is that Shawn Kemp's development was quick, that I will add. If you look at his rookie season, 6.5 points per game, also averaged 4.3 rebounds, but he made a very nice jump from year one to year two, 15 points per game in the second year with 8.5 rebounds. And he accredited, and I remember reading this a lot at the time, he credited a lot of the help for him to Xavier McDaniel, who at that time in 91-92 was then playing for the Knicks and then Boston. He credited him with a lot of being able to make the jump. So in a way, Seattle got a player that developed very quickly and went to their rise as they were early in the playoffs in the early 90s and doing that. So he had a good jump, but you're right. His development might have been the same playing with a point guard. It could have been different, obviously, if you went anyplace else. So, or if he didn't have Xavier McDaniel in his life to really help him.
Whose minutes does he get there? Whose minutes does he get there? If he winds up with the Bulls, let's play this out a little bit. If he winds up with the Bulls, does he get the Bill Cartwright minutes? Is that what happens in the 90s?
Well, they probably still put him at the 4, and Bill Cartwright hadn't been traded for Oakley again until the next year. So, yeah, probably. He'd probably get some of those minutes. Their 4s weren't really good on that team. Horace Grant hadn't come on that team yet. So, yeah, it'd have been interesting.
That would have been interesting. But yeah, with the Orlando Magic, that's a tough one where I don't think it would have went well because there's Markelle Fultz, and I like Markelle Fultz. He's still developing, but it's not Gary Payton, it's not John Wall, it's not somebody who's going to be a floor general in that way. DJ Augustine, who I also like, sort of the same thing. You know what I mean? He's not quite Andre Miller, who is probably the best version of DJ Augustine, if that makes any sense.
No. I get that. All right, last team I got for you, I thought about taking out West. Phoenix Suns. Put Shawn Kemp on today's Phoenix Suns. Get him paired up with a little Devin Booker. Don't really got the point guard yet. Not really sure what they got out of center and DeAndre Ayton. How does Shawn Kemp fit in all that?
I think with Ricky Rubio, it will work. It will work out.
It's funny. I forgot they recently signed Ricky Rubio.
Yeah, I think with Rubio, it would work out. And Devin Booker, granted, I think he gets his assists largely because he's a ball-dominant guard who gets double-teamed and has to pass out of them. I don't necessarily think he's like this master sort of shooting guard, combo guard passer or whatever, but he's not a bad passer. And I think that you can run pick and rolls with both of them. With Rubio's that's an ideal target to play with Shawn Kemp, I think. I don't know how he plays with DeAndre Ayton, though. That's something that would be interesting, and that's the sort of problem you would run into with some of those 6'9", 6'10" power forwards of the 90s who were mainly centers back then. A lot of them were post-up bigs. What would they do today? How would somebody like that play with DeAndre Ayton? I would like to think that you would find a way to make it work. You know what I mean? Because I do think you can play those kind of guys together. I understand you would want the spacing, but I think if both guys could step out to 17 feet and hit that mid-range jumper, I think that alone would be enough to open things up. And, Devin Booker is a guy that hits a lot of threes, and he also gets to the line 7-8 times, maybe even more than that per game. So I think that would be an interesting fit. Better than the Orlando one, but that Washington one would be ideal. Like somebody like that would be the ideal third man to what Wall and Beal have going on there.